So interpersonal communication is communication with oneself. So that's what we want to focus on for a little bit, and just this idea of how we're communicating with ourselves in a public way, in a private way, in a relational way, and online. So the first thing we want to define is this idea of face. So face is what you want others to see. You present yourself in a certain way. Generally, a lot of times when people go out in public, they're going to make themselves look presentable. I know for me, when I'm at home, I don't look the same as when I go out in public. So that's putting on a mask or my public self. And a lot of times you want to sort of inflate other people's estimation. So you might set yourself up as being maybe more professional than you might feel. Oftentimes there's a level of embarrassment. So if you put yourself out there and then you do something that is out of character or not what people anticipate, that can cause embarrassment. So what can happen there is you might have an element, sort of a fall from grace, because there isn't a matching of who you are with how you see yourself. So again, there's that element of embarrassment that happens. So idea is just apologize. If that's something that's a concern to you, apologize and let it go and move on, because there's a lot of things that you can't control, and unfortunately, once something's out there in the world, it's not something that you have the ability to control any longer. Then we can look at at the idea of the private self. So there is this element of self-disclosure. You get to choose what you feel comfortable disclosing. So these are maybe thoughts and beliefs and feelings that you may have struggled with in your own experience. And it's a decision about whether you're going to tell somebody else. Another one they look at is this idea of the interpersonal process of intimacy. And it has to do with the closeness that we might feel towards somebody else. As you go through, maybe you feel a little bit more connection with somebody, so you feel more available to share with them. And there are components about who people are that might allow you to feel safer with that person. So there's people that intentionally, therapists intentionally work to build rapport. We call it rapport. That's building that relationship with somebody, and we try to do it relatively quickly so that people feel safe with us right up front. And the ways that you're going to do that is making sure that you're doing a good job of listening and making eye contact. Another element that happens in helping somebody else feel safe to disclose is disclose a little bit about yourself. As a therapist, you don't want to go into a great deal of detail. You're not going to give a lot of people a lot of information. You're just give them a little bit of information just to get them prompted, and then stop talking as a therapist. Now, when you guys are in a regular relationship, then you're going to have a give and take, hopefully, between the two of you. Yeah. And then the things that are important is just if listeners are supportive after you make that disclosure. If they're not going to be supportive, it's going to be very difficult for you to continue to respond to that person. So that there needs to be sort of an acknowledgement or a safety zone, or the person's nodding their head, they're engaging with you. If they're not doing that, then you're going to lose that piece. And it does happen that both parties, it's helpful, both parties are sharing. If one side is giving all the information and the other one isn't, then there's going to be probably a little bit of lack of safety that the one that's doing all the sharing might feel. We might have differences too in personality, in culture. What we know is, culturally, there are some cultures where they're not going to be sharing a lot of information or personal information. They're not going to feel comfortable with that. If you're online, there is the perception that a lot of times people feel safe online, but then you have the trolls are out there trying to say mean things about people on the backside, and that doesn't feel good either. So that, I think you have to really take that into consideration before you share that. And then just mental health. I mean, there are situations I've had when maybe somebody maybe gave a little bit more of their information than might have been normal, and it might have been just a mental health issue. I don't really, in my work, I don't really deal with people that have a lot of mental health issues. They deal more with a regular therapist, but you know, it is something that can come up. I mean, you don't always know when someone's dealing with something on the backside. The relational self, we always call this the onion theory, because you can see there's an onion. But even, you know, when I discussed it before, it was something that we always related it to because it creates a great metaphor. And this is also known as the social penetration theory. And the people that were associated with this are psychologists Irvin Altman and Delmas Taylor. I think when you look at this, it kind of makes sense when you get to know somebody that you get more to the core. And I think that you could take this model and use it a couple different ways. Let's just talk about it in relationship with how you choose to share yourself with somebody else first. On the initial level, you might give them just general information. The outermost layer might be more demographic information, like where you came from, what's your major, just general information that someone might, you know, you don't mind sharing with people in general. Intermediate might be attitudes and opinions, how you feel about certain things. Now, you notice when you create a conversation with somebody, you might start with the peripheral layers and just ask them general questions about, you know, who are you, and then you go into asking a little bit more information about, hey, what do you do in your spare time, or you know, what kind of music do you listen to? I don't know. For me, political beliefs actually are a little bit more, yeah, they're a little deeper for me, but I generally don't share my political beliefs with my classes. And then the last one is central layers, which would be values and traits. Your self-concept, your fears, things that you're not going to share with everybody, but you're going to share with those people that are you're closest to. And I think about this model too, based on the way a person might experience themselves and how well you know yourself. Because there are elements that maybe you might be a little bit deeper in some areas and not as deep in others. So how well do you know yourself? And maybe I might talk about how well do I know myself when I'm in a relationship with another person? How well do I know myself when I'm entering into a new situation that I've never been in before? So you find that you're in different levels or different layers based on your own experience and looking at your own behaviors. Johari window is another model. I've added a couple pieces to this, which is just because that's the way I was trained, is that they've added the others and the self to the sides of this particular image. But what we look at is the 4 different quadrants and how they show up. The first one is quadrant 1, and it's what other people know about you and what you know about yourself. So there isn't any confusion. I'm going to be able to tell you my information. Everybody knows it. It's things that people can see, general information. Then if you go down to quadrant 2, this is an area that other people might know about you, but you don't know about you. So this might be how you're coming across to other people. It might be people's perception. It might be maybe you have a little tick, you know, that you may be not even aware that you have. Quadrant 3 is a part of yourself that you don't share with other people. That is a secret. It's a secret from other people, and it's a hidden part of yourself. And quadrant 4, I think, is really interesting. Quadrant 4 is an area that other people don't know about you and you don't know about you. When you think about it, you know, take a second to think about how you might get into the information in quadrant 4. How would you figure those things out? So you look at the elements that are listed there, they're mentioning some things like unconscious motivations and impulses. And really, at the very bottom there, they're mentioning the idea of critical self-reflection. This comes about by actually putting yourself maybe in situations where you've never been before and challenging you so that you have an opportunity to sort of experience who you are on a different level. I think this one's interesting because, you know, as you go through life, you're going to put yourself in situations that you've never been in before. And it's interesting because you get a chance to figure out who you are and how you handle things. So those are always fun ones to explore. So when you look at competent disclosure, the first thing they say is know yourself. Maybe before you disclose, you know, make sure you understand how you feel about something. There are times, I think, when we have friends and maybe we're not sure how we feel about it, so that might be what we're discussing with them. But that's somebody that you feel comfortable with. I think, you know, I would think about this more as, you know, if you don't have an intimate relationship or you're not super close with that person, how do you decide what's safe to tell them and what's not safe to tell? I'd say first figure out where you stand on an issue maybe before you share about it. And then that gives you an opportunity to share information with clarity. And know who you're talking to. So if you, I guess that's one of the reasons I don't talk a lot about my political viewpoints, because I don't know who I'm talking to. And there isn't really a reason to share that. So I'm going to figure out who I'm talking to before I share it. Maybe I'll let them share their viewpoint before I say anything about mine. Things like that. Don't force somebody else to self-disclose. Don't go, oh, come on, tell me how you feel. It's not a good way of getting it done. Let people share when they feel comfortable sharing. Don't force somebody else to share. And generally, if you share some information about yourself, again, they're going to feel a bit more comfortable sharing about themselves. Avoid stereotypes. So I would say the book says gender stereotypes. I'd say avoid stereotypes. And when it comes down to it, we have a tendency to place people into categories. It doesn't help to ignore that you have them. You might have stereotypes. And people go, oh my God, it's wrong that you have stereotypes. I don't think it's wrong that you have them. I think you need to be aware of them and make a decision outside of just the stereotype. So rather than just responding to people based on what your belief is of them, give them an opportunity to show you who they are. Go, oh, isn't that interesting that I have that stereotype, and take a step back and let yourself experience it in a different way. And then also be sensitive to differences. And the book says cultural differences. I say just differences in general. I think it goes along with stereotypes. There are things that are going to make you different. That's actually interesting. I think that makes people interesting, the fact that they have differences. So just be aware and take your time. Don't be in a big hurry to try to push the conversation or get someone to disclose or try to go faster than people are ready for. And the last one that they talk about on here is this idea of how you present yourself online. The textbook talks a lot about this. I think it's important for you to realize, you know, that stuff's out there and it's out there forever. So you really want to be aware of how you're presenting yourself. This warranty theory mentioned in the textbook also talks about, you know, how you're going to be perceived, and if you have outside sources that are supporting you, then your information is going to look like it's more valuable. So again, high value is going to be when it's supported by others. Low value is when it's not and people aren't going to support it. So really want to make sure whatever image you present out there in the world, there's a consistency between how you present yourself and knowing that if people are contradicting that belief system, that it may show up differently. All right, there we go. So we just talked about a little bit about considering yourself, and we focused on several different aspects of intrapersonal communication.